Welcome. My name is Kendra Morgan, and I'm the host of the Rise and Build podcast, where we hope to empower you to rise up and build a strong family, knowing you have to strengthen your hands to do the good work. Come with us as we rise and build. Hey, you guys, welcome to the Rise and Build podcast. Today is a fun day because it is roundtable, which means that I'm sitting across from Ashley Hefley, and we are going to sum up the Neurodivergent podcast. And that was done with Stephanie Barton. She is a speech and language pathologist, and she covered autism and selective mutism and what are those things? What is neurodivergent? What does that look like? And the best person to help me brainstorm this is Ashley Hefley. So Ashley is part of the Building All Children team. We all love and adore her. She is our Rise and Build coordinator. So she runs our Build moms and our Build dads, and she does a fabulous job with it. Okay, Ashley, you've got to let our listeners know about you. So tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley. I'm a wife to my best friend, Tyler. I have two little boys at home, Noah and Elijah. And the biggest thing about me, the thing that I want to show the most, is that I'm a devoted follower of Jesus. I love being a part of the Building All Children team. Before I was the Rise and Build coordinator, I was a special education teacher and a general education teacher. I actually got to have the role as teacher in an emotional disturbance classroom. My passion has always been for all children, all of them, in the gen ed world and in the special ed world. And a really fun fact about me is one of my sons is actually neurodivergent, which gives me a unique perspective on all the things we're talking about today. But I wanted to share a little bit about my role here at Building All Children because it's such a blessing to me. Like Kendra said, I serve as the Rise and Build coordinator, and I get to lead the parents of Building All Children. I lead a biblically based support group for mothers, and I get to support the men that lead a group for our fathers. I also help getting to produce this podcast, and I get to share valuable content online for parents. And I just feel like it aligns so well with my heart because our mission truly is to empower parents to rise up and build.
I love it. What I love about it is, Building All Children is based off of Nehemiah 2:18. And so it says, they strengthened their hand for the good work and they rised up and they were in charge of building, and building is never ending. It's always going. And you actually fit in that role so beautifully because you're always building these families and these moms and these dads. Grandmas, we have grandpas come through here. We have aunts and uncles. We have foster families. And we will take them. We'll meet them where they are, and we will help them get to the next step that they need to get to. And you just do it beautifully. And then also you've kind of blew past the social media part, but you run all that and you coordinate all that, and it takes so much work. And so you do Facebook and Instagram, you keep up with our website. And so anyways, you have a huge role and you're a huge part of this team. But I want to really learn a little bit more about you. You mentioned your two sons. So could you talk to us about being a mom? One, I don't know. I just know when I became a mom, I had to take off my child development hat and just be a mom. And you just mentioned you were you're an educator. You were in the education field. And so what's it like being a mom?
Yeah, I love that. I love that question. So when I became a mom, had a typical pregnancy, my first son was Noah. Super excited, of course, to build our family. And everything was going as planned until it wasn't. We had a few little hiccups towards the end of our pregnancy, but still nothing super scary. We thought everything was still going to turn out fine. And of course, it did. But during my delivery, we had a few complications. Again, we thought, okay, that everything is going to work out. And as he started developing, we noticed that his development was much slower than the typical child. And even though I had the background of a special education teacher, you don't always see it in your own children. I think I was in denial that he wasn't developing typically. And it hurt my heart in the beginning. And there's so much joy in the process and in the journey. And I can share a little bit more about that as we go. But in the beginning, I was really struggling. I went to the Lord, and I'm so thankful that I did, but I went to him with a lot of grief. I didn't understand why things weren't going perfectly, or developing the way that is typical. But he did develop. He just develops at his own time and pace. And I also wanted to mention that because my passion has always been for all children, there's a verse, Psalm 37:23. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his ways. And I have always seen the hand of God on my life, and he prepared me ahead of time to learn about children with all abilities. I had a passion for children with all abilities, and now I get to mother a child who's neurodivergent and a child who is typically developing. And I am so grateful that I've had both experiences, and I'm so grateful for both of my sons and what they bring to the world. They're both beautiful people. They just think differently, and that's great.
Yeah, no, I love it. They're both created in the image of the Lord, right? And we know that everyone's different and they have their strengths and their weaknesses, and I wouldn't change either one of them. I love them for who they are. So what we're wrapping up is neurodivergent. Tell me, what are your thoughts with that? What is it? Kind of in case if someone didn't listen to the past podcast about that, explain to our listeners about all that.
So if you're not familiar with what neurodivergence is, neurodivergence refers to the natural variations in the human brain functions. It often affects behavioral traits. This could encompass lots of different neurological differences. There's autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and so many other things that fall under the category of neurodivergence. But something I want to say to parents is these differences are not defects. Rather, they're just different ways of learning and thinking. Your child was beautifully and wonderfully made, but if you're neurodivergent, you just think a little bit differently.
So when I was talking to Stephanie about this, I mentioned to her, I feel like we've had teachers ask us to come teach on this because they don't know what it means. They don't know what it is. I've had teachers say, it's like a new word. What is it? And it's not new. It has been around a long time. Stephanie explained it. She's thought like we're late to Oklahoma. And I don't know why everyone thinks it's a new word, but it's not.
No, not at all. We've had neurodivergence for as long as time has been. But as we've grown and we have discovered more as a society about different types of disorders or differences, that is just an overarching term to describe all of them. Just an umbrella term. And
no, I think that's good. I think it was like really kind of developed in like a term in like 1998, or I mean, it's not a new term. I think what's happened is over the years, the spectrum disorder, the autism, now it's the level 1, 2, and 3, ADHD can fall under that, sensory processing. Like the spectrum disorder is so wide now. That I think that's kind of where this term is coming from. And that's my guess. Is that what you're thinking too?
Yeah, I think so.
But let's talk a little bit about what Stephanie had to say about the autism spectrum disorder. We wanted to cover that because we know that those numbers are rising and we're seeing more and more children being diagnosed with that. We are also seeing more adults that were never diagnosed as a child, but they're going, hey, I think I had that. I didn't know I had that, but I think it came from me, and they're getting tested and they're getting diagnosed with that. So tell me, I know you worked with that in the public school, which is one reason I wanted you to kind of visit about some of this too. So I don't know, share more of your knowledge in that.
So diagnosis is interesting because I feel like a lot of children and adults are not diagnosed when they need to be, to receive the supports that would really help them in life. And then on the flip side of that, I feel like we have a lot of misdiagnosis or overdiagnosis even. So I appreciated how on the podcast on autism that Stephanie discussed how you obtain a diagnosis and when it's needed.
Yes.
And I also loved how she broke down the levels of autism and how she mentioned that we shouldn't focus so much on the level, but more so where the individual child is and what supports and needs they have and how we can meet those needs.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is getting them the support that they need, getting them the accommodations that they need in school. And I think, a while back, the laws kind of changed in the state of Oklahoma for insurance purposes, that if you got that diagnosis, then the insurance covered a lot of the therapy, and it's expensive to get the right therapy. So I feel like there was a time where a lot of parents were going out trying to get that diagnosis so they could get the therapies covered. But then I also feel that on the flip side, we've had families come in here with a diagnosis that after we've spent quite a bit of time with the child, not that we diagnose or take away diagnoses, but we just want the families to get the resources. And sometimes they don't probably end up having true autism.
Right. And something I appreciated that she said that I was going to ask you your thoughts on, she mentioned that therapy needs to fit the family. It may be great for one family and their belief system and the goals they have set up for their child, but for another family, that same exact therapy may not work for them. And there is so many options on the table. When you were listening or a part of that conversation, what did you think about that?
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great point, because I feel like, one, I don't think families know where to go. They don't know how to get help or the right therapist. I think it's overwhelming if you get a list of therapists that are provided through your insurance. They have no idea who's good, where to go. I also know that, or even Stephanie kind of mentioned that there's certain therapists that are specialized in certain things, but a lot of times it's not listed on that website that they work for or whatever. And so I've thought her whole point with that was really good. And I loved when she said, if it's not the right fit, find a new therapist.
I love that.
Because I feel like we get stuck and we just will kind of keep going week after week. I think you have to give it a little bit of time.
Right.
It takes time to build therapy, but we also know there's larger therapy centers that if that therapist is gone, they'll just stick another therapist in that place. And that's not therapy, because that kid doesn't know that therapist. And half of having successful therapy is the relationship that is there and the trust that is built. She talked a little bit about that too.
I had no idea that there were so many specialties within therapeutic practices. That blew my mind. There's so many things out there for parents. Just hop online and start doing your research and come to Building All Children if you're in the area, because we'll walk through that with you. I ended up finding Building All Children as a mom. I mentioned my son and I needed resources. I didn't care about the labels. I knew that he was neurodivergent, but I didn't care in what way. Yeah. But I did know that I needed support to help build up his developmental skills. And that's what's beautiful about BAC is you can walk in here and find that, but you may not live near us. So the internet is a great resource, and community groups, like she mentioned, getting on Facebook and online and finding people and reaching out. Don't be afraid to find your people and find the resources for your children. They're out there, and there's so many more than I even knew about.
Well, it brings a good point, because she was saying that she hears it all the time that families feel like they're on an island by themselves, and they're really not, because the percentage is going up so much. It's just, I think people are afraid to talk about it. And I think the support groups are great, but just being behind a computer online doesn't make you feel supported. And so you have to figure out where your support group is in person. whatever state or town you live in, they are there. I promise. You just have to get connected with people. And I always say other moms are the wisest. Like they're someone that's been through it or going through it is where you can really seek a lot of wisdom from.
I definitely felt like an island in the beginning of my motherhood. I was the first of all of my friends to become a mother. And then on top of that, to have a child with different developmental needs, I didn't know who to turn to. So that is what's so great about finding out there are so many mothers walking through this alongside you. And if you are a friend of someone who has a child going through these things, you can still be that support person. I had one friend, I was really just letting it out, and she said, listen, God is sovereign. He has a plan for your child. He has a plan for you, a plan for your motherhood. And this is not a mistake. You've got this. And she wasn't even a mom yet.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and you're a mom and your child is developing typically and does not have neurodivergence, you can still be that support person for a mom or a dad or a family member of a child that has neurodivergence.
Let's visit a little bit about selective mutism. I feel like it's not something a lot of people know about, but I feel like every person needs to know about it in case if you run across someone that has it so that you'll know kind of what to say, what not to say. I believe Stephanie's kind of the expert in that. And so she has been in that field for a long, long, long time. And she is very wise in that. What kind of spoke to you with what she shared about that, Ashley?
Well, it makes sense, but I had no idea that it was an anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
Now looking back in my teaching life, I can see a few of my students may have had selective mutism, and I wish I would have been more educated on it. To meet them where they're at. If you haven't listened to the episode, please go back because she gave so many awesome tips on how to still connect with a child that has selective mutism. I don't know. I loved how she gave a lot of examples of connection points where you don't leave a lot of room for them to have to respond.
Right.
But you can still communicate with them.
Yeah, we think it's asking them a question, but there's so many other ways that she gave that you can still connect with the child. And I love that she went there and she really was talking to teachers and to educators. So I was like, every teacher needs to hear this because like you said, I think they probably through the years will have children with selective mutism, but you just put them under the shy category or the quiet category. And it's not that.
So you mentioned that you met a child here at BAC.
Yeah.
And you were able to kind of see that this might be selective mutism. What was it about that child that made you think it might be this?
Well, so it's funny because I have had a little bit of experience with it over the years, really through Stephanie. And one thing she taught me a long, long time ago was to try to get them to communicate is to kind of use a whisper voice. And sometimes they'll whisper back to you. And so what happened was I was out at a childcare center observing the classroom really for the teacher. We were trying to help with classroom rearranging and everything. And I noticed this little girl never said a word. And so I mentioned to this, smart as a whip, I knew she knew the information, but never said a word the whole time I was in the classroom. And so I asked the teacher about it and she was like, oh, she never talks. And I was like, what do you mean never? And she's like, we've had her for 2 years and she never talks. So I actually went back to the mom, but it's a perfect example of what Stephanie talked about. She dances and sings and is super talkative at home. And so the mom was like, she thought I was kind of crazy. So I just kind of told her about it, what I was thinking, but I can't diagnose. It's not what we're about. But if it is that, we need to get our help. And it wasn't until her grandparents came in town and she wouldn't talk. And it made the mom realize wait a minute, she isn't talking outside of our home. And so long story short, she ended up going to Stephanie and Stephanie has really helped that family. And we referred several families to Stephanie. And she just can end up it's got to build trust and lower that anxiety. But it is so fascinating because it is all about that anxiety.
Well, and it makes me think about advocating for your child, because we all know our children. And if your child has selective mutism, you all mentioned, like, you may not know at first that your child is even struggling with this because they don't have anxiety with you. So they're communicating fine at home. But then when they're in other social situations that make them anxious, that's when it really kicks in. But once you are aware, I love that this sets you up to be able to advocate for your child and step in and help them. And that's something I'm so thankful for as a parent, that I feel like I've been given this awesome task or job to cheer my child on, to advocate for them, and just to communicate for them when they're unable to communicate certain needs for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Stephanie, because I asked her, I was like, I mean, it's great for Tulsa. We kind of know who to refer these families to, but what if this listener isn't in Tulsa? Where do they go? What do they do to get help? And she's so awesome. She was like, I mean, I'll still help them. I'll connect them to the right person. And she's good because, like, we had an older boy that after spending some time with him, I felt like maybe he had it because he uses his older brother, to talk all the time. But she spent some time with him and didn't see it. But there was still some anxiety creeping in. And so she kind of helped mom with that. And I remember I asked Stephanie, like, well, if it's an anxiety thing, do you send them to counseling or do you send them to a speech pathologist? And I thought her answer was interesting on that. I mean, if you're trained in it as a speech pathologist, she recommends that versus counseling.
Right. And I think that may even just be a Google search. With the way the internet is today, if you don't live in the Tulsa area, Google speech pathologist with expertise in selective mutism. And in bios, a lot of times people will put what their training, their background is in, and that might be really helpful if you're thinking, man, I want to find a Stephanie near me. That might be how you find someone.
Okay, so we've talked about autism. We've talked about selective mutism. Love how we got to brainstorm Stephanie Barton's expertise in those areas. But let's go a little bit deeper for our families. Ashley, let's visit about what do we do with it? What accommodations do they need? How do we help these families connect to the right resources to get help?
Well, I think when you first find out that your child has differences, you need to educate yourself about what's going on with your child. And I also want to emphasize that, again, every child is different. So even though your child may fall under a category, that doesn't mean that they're going to experience everything that entails. So if your child has autism, it may not be that they have all of the symptoms that come with autism all of the time. So just know your child, educate yourself on the condition, and then start communicating. Communicate openly with your teachers and your child's caregivers about not only your child's challenges, but also their strengths. And that's something that I've learned here through being at Building All Children, is you can never communicate enough about your child's strengths. They matter. Your child's strengths matter just as much as their difficulties or things that they're working on. So that's where I feel like a parent can really step up. But I would love to talk more about how to prepare for an IEP meeting or a parent conference with you, because I know that you've supported parents through a lot of it.
Well, yes, and I'm passionate about the children getting the right resources, but I also feel like you have been on the other side of the table as an educator and helping families in that way. But tell me the process. Like, if I'm sitting here listening to it, okay, I got a diagnosis. I know he needs help. We're in the school system. What do I do with this diagnosis?
Well, I'd like to back up a little bit. If your child's not in the school system yet and you still feel like you want to start that rapport with your school, or you may not know this, but many school districts provide services, special services, before a child is school aged. So you can get your IEP rolling even before they're in pre-K.
Yeah, at age 3. They have to serve them at age 3.
So that's wonderful. If you didn't know that, go to your district and start talking about it. And then it also builds rapport. You get to know the people within your area district, making those relationships and those connections. And then they can start to know your child, which is the biggest thing. But I would say gather documentation from your pediatrician, other evaluations. Say you have previous IEPs or plans, bring them. Come prepared. You can even just jot down your wants for your child, where you want their life to go, your hopes for them. I think the more you can share and teach and express about your child, it will help the team involved in creating a plan for your child. Again, I'm going to say it again. Prepare, think ahead of specific strengths your child has. If you need to, maybe bring a support person too.
That's good.
I've been in a lot of IEP meetings where it's raw. And I think I mentioned in the beginning, when I first found out that I had a child with some differences, I took it so hard. But as I've journeyed through motherhood, now I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
I had my mother-in-law at one point asked if I had a magic wand and I could make my son neurotypical, would I choose that for him? And I thought about it and paused and really reflected. And I said, no, I wouldn't, because he is fearfully and wonderfully made. And the way he thinks is beautiful. It may not be the same as the way I think or a neurotypical child thinks, but it's wonderful. And I would not change it. And it's taken me a long time to get there. But in the beginning, especially if you're walking into your very first IEP meeting, maybe you need a support person, somebody that's willing to journey this with you.
I think that's wise because it can be intimidating. There's a lot of people in the room, a lot of people in this field that can talk the talk. And as a parent, we don't understand what they're talking about. But I think it's important, a couple things, just as you were talking, I think it's important to remember that it's a bit of a loss of dreams, and it is okay to grieve and to let your body go through that process. And so if you walk in and you don't feel like you have it all together, it's an okay place to be. And then I love the support. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Find a friend, grab a family member, and they don't have to know either. It's just having someone to be there with you, because the process, it's kind of complicated. It just is, but you are the lead of it. You can call a meeting anytime you want. You can stop the meeting anytime you want. You are the advocate for your child. And I always say, no one cares or loves them the way you do. It's just, there's not anyone in the world that loves them the way you do. And so you have to fight for them.
I'm so glad you said that. Even though there's so many teachers and administrators, caregivers that work with your child that love them, they really do. They care. That's why they started out doing what they're doing. It's still not their personal child. And God ordained you to be your child's parent. And there's just something special about that. And I love how you mentioned, like, you're the one leading this meeting. You're the one advocating for your child, so showing them how you want them to partner with you and support your kid. So I love everything you said.
No, I think it's good. I think you have to be careful. We've had some families that they just demand too much.
Sure.
The schools can only do so much.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And it's not the school's job to raise your child. We're raising our children, but it is the school's job to come alongside and to make them have day-to-day success, with the help of the caregiver for sure.
And support your teachers and your teacher's aides. Don't forget about them. It doesn't have to be that you shower them with presents, but say, I appreciate the hard work that you're doing. Thank you for supporting my child and partnering with me. Write them notes. I think teachers save those and pull them back out when the days are long and hard. So just don't forget to remember that they're a part of your team and you want that closeness with your your support team.
No, I love it. I love it. And then the more you build that support team, it's just the more people helping your child.
Right.
You know? So, okay. Well, Building All Children is about the truth. We're always about scripture. I know you could rattle many off, but is there one that kind of touched your heart today that you'd like to share?
Yes. So when I came to Building All Children, I know this verse. I've heard this verse before, but it hit different. Sitting across the table of somebody that's helping me, and they paused and they said, I want to speak a verse over you and explain. So my child development specialist said, I'm going to speak Psalm 139:14 over you. And the verse is, I'll praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and my soul knows that very well. As my son's mom, I knew that he was wonderfully and beautifully made, but I was still wrestling through, like you were mentioning earlier, loss of dreams and expectations. And there was just something so beautiful and clear and direct about telling me, your son was fearfully and wonderfully made, and there is no mistakes that were made. God has a plan and a purpose for his life. Yeah. And it truly changed everything for me. It was just the way that I thought shifted. And so I want to be that person sitting across the table from you digitally. If you are sitting here thinking, man, I don't even know what category of neurodivergence, but I know that my child thinks differently. I want to tell you that your child was fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are God's works, and your child is one of those works. He has a plan and a purpose for your child, and I want you to think about that, dwell on it, and just let it change the way you think.
Beautiful. Ashley, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, your mommy instinct is so good, and it's fun to hear the mommy side of you, but I also know the education you have, that you can bring a lot to the table. So thank you for being open and honest and sharing a little piece of your story so that we could help more people out there. So I'm grateful for you.
Thanks for having me.
Let us close with a word of prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for these children in our lives. Thank you for all the resources you have placed in our life to help us rise up and build. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for listening to the Rise and Build podcast, brought to you by Building All Children, a child development program in Tulsa, Oklahoma. To learn more about Building All Children or the Rise and Build podcast, please visit buildingallchildren.org. This podcast is crowdfunded. We appreciate our sponsors and the donations given by our listeners. Come with us as we rise and build.